Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for braving these brutal winter winds to join us. I understand it's the coldest night for at least 20 years in Philadelphia history, so applaud yourself, right? It's nothing compared to Minnesota. Before we begin, just the usual reminders to turn off your cell phones, refrain from picture taking, and then, of course, please plan to join us upstairs afterward for the book signing. My name is Andy Cahan. I'm Director of Author Events. We have more talent than time tonight, so we're just going to jump right in. Tonight, our guests will present their work in both alphabetical and chronological order as we move from the early 1900s toward the end of the 20th century. No stranger to sub-freezing temperatures, Marlon James comes to us from Minnesota, where he teaches creative writing at Macalester College. James is the author of the acclaimed novel, The Book of Night Women, winner of the 2010 Dayton Literary Prize, and John Crow's Devil, a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. His latest novel, A Brief History of 7 Killings, delves into the attempted assassination of Bob Marley in the late 1970s while weaving its way in and out of the politics and underworld of Kingston and New York during the course of 30 years. A Brief History has been nominated for the 2015 National Book Critics Circle Award and appeared on many year-end best lists. The writing career of our second presenter, Bridgett M. Davis, began in very auspicious fashion when her first novel, Shifting Through Neutral, was a finalist for the Hurston Wright Legacy Award. Ms. Davis's work has appeared in many publications, including The Washington Post, Essence, and the Oprah Magazine. She is also the director of the award-winning film Naked Acts, as well as a professor at Baruch College, CUNY, where she teaches creative writing and journalism, and is director of the Sidney Harmon Writer-in-Residence program. Her new novel, Into the Go-Slow, follows a young woman from Detroit to Nigeria as she mourns the death of her sister. Novelist Chris Abani called Into the Go-Slow a beautiful allegory of love, family, expansion, hope, and transformation. Last and certainly not least, our first presenter, LaShonda Katrice Barnett, is the author of the short story collection Callaloo and a multiple Pushcart Prize nominee. She is the editor of I Got Thunder, Black Women Songwriters on Their Craft, as well as the forthcoming book, Drop the Mic, Women, Hip Hop, and Neo-Soul Artists, Sound Off on Creativity and Commerce. In a coveted starred review, a writer for Publishers Weekly calls Jam on the Vine a wonderful debut novel that takes early 20th century and brings it to life. Eva Williams is a brilliant young woman who grows up in Texas, the child of emancipated slaves. Her frustration with the Jim Crow South causes her to uproot and move to Kansas City, where she and her lover, Ona, start a newspaper, the first female-run African-American newspaper called Jam on the Vine. The book is a wonderfully vibrant, fully realized vision of the shadowy corners of America's history. Enough said, please welcome our first presenter, LaShonda Katrice Barnett.
Good evening. It is a pleasure to be here, especially because I taught Marlon James's debut novel, John Crow's Devil, many semesters. It is a fantastic book. I am haunted still by this character named Lucinda, who lives below the church steeple. And on the train ride here to Philadelphia, I began Into the Go-Slow by another reader. Tonight, our other reader, Bridgett Davis. And I am immediately drawn in by protagonist Angie's voice as she tells the story of her sister, Ella. But a little bit about my novel, Jam on the Vine. In 1979, I was 5 years old, and my grandmother sent me on the first of many errands to the corner store located at the intersection of 15th and Brooklyn in Kansas City, Missouri. She put 35 cents in my hand, and she told me to go and fetch the Call. The Call was Kansas City's black newspaper. My grandmother read that newspaper as though her life depended on it, as though she would be quizzed on it, and after she finished, she'd pick up the telephone and she would call my great aunts, her 3 sisters, and she would begin to talk about every single article in the paper. That had a profound impact on me, and later on, it would serve as the impetus for my first novel, which is a story about 2 Black women who launch a newspaper in the Jim Crow Midwest, probably when the Black press was needed the most, because it was undeniably the most anarchic period in our history. The newspaper is launched in 1918, about 8 months before the Red Summer of 1919, which is when there were about 30 race riots in the United States. This is not common knowledge. I don't understand why it should be. It should be in every single social studies book in America. Imagine Ferguson on steroids, because that was May through September of 1919 when all of these riots broke out, and many newspapers were born during this period. I'll begin the reading at the beginning of the novel when our heroine, Ivo Williams, is 9 years old. Juba, September 1897. Ivo liked to carry on about all she could do. Still, how to mend a broken promise had her beat. She had given her word not to go beyond the pantry, passing many dull hours there while Mama finished her duties in the kitchen. At 6, 7, 8, obedience came easy. The trouble with 9 came when Miss Susan entered the kitchen to tell Mama the dinner menu. With her low, husky voice and tall, boyish frame, Miss Susan made a handsome woman. She had a moon face full of light freckles and cheeks that called to mind 2 perfect peaches. Her eyes, and the creases that framed them, crinkled up to slits whenever she smiled. Miss Susan laid the town's newspaper, the Starksville Enterprise, on the table. "I bet you can't read these headlines for me." Ivo hitched up her legs on the lower rung of the stool and cleared her throat. "Germans no longer love us. Their sympathies are all on the side of Spain, and the Senate will have to yield on sugar and wool." A relieved smile drew across Mama's face as Miss Susan nodded contentedly. "I suppose this means you're almost grown. Grown folks always read while they wait." Ivo wanted to tell Miss Susan the terrible job of waiting belonged mostly to children, and none of the children she knew owned anything to read. On a good day, Miss Susan left the paper behind while Mama cooked, but not today. Ivo sucked in her breath, ducked past her mother, and crept down the hall to the library, grateful for the crimson carpet between her broken shoes and the fine wood floors. The Starks had money. Something to do with cattle, corn, and cotton. It was all around her in the books, more numerous than the schoolhouse's stash and better looking. After Maybelle, Papa, and them, Ivo loved books best. Books were a friend to anyone who opened them. Blowing a whirligig to make the cells go round or talking up a storm to a cornhusk doll was all right for passing the time, but you never went anywhere new or met anyone special like you did in the pages of a book. In golden-haired Gertrude and old Mother Hubbard, she found steady companions, and she had traveled as far as Arabia without ever leaving Little Tunis. How to get a book home was something Ivo thought about a lot. Books were hard to steal. Books had to be carried. Books could not go missing in a house for too long a time. Newspapers were easy. She could slide one under her clothes and walk the half-mile home while its reader would think it mislaid. The scheme had worked plenty times before, but that day the newspaper was not in its usual place or on any shelf she could reach. She darted across the foyer and up the back staircase to Miss Susan's bedroom, where everything was dressed in some shade of yellow and smelled like honeysuckle. Swallowing was a chore with such a dry mouth, and the drum in her chest thumped extra hard. How would it look, tiptoeing around where she had no business being? Crouching on the floor, she raised the bed skirt. Dust. She shimmied open the top dresser drawer. Nothing but fancy brooches and pearls. In the far corner, the marble-top stand beside the chair caught her eye. Eureka! Or, as Mama would have said, had it been a snake, it would have bit you. She slipped the newspaper under her shirt, half of it cool against her chest, the other half snug between her breeches and her underpants. She threw a kiss to Mama and flew through the kitchen door quicker than grass through a goose. Just the thought of reading made her run fast as her legs could carry her, beyond the gazebo, past the outbuildings at the edge of the yard. She trotted past the plantation bell to the narrow dirt road, bounded on both sides by downy fields. Some of the flowers were still learning to be themselves. Three-leaved stems like poison ivy held blossoms soon to burst open, pink like the flesh of a watermelon. They would follow the sun, just like morning glories, till the field looked like a snowstorm hit it, all white and full of fluff. She waved to the white children from the Baptist orphanage and to the Negro children she wouldn't see at school until early November, when cotton-picking season was done. She skirted the corn cribs, the mill house, minding her step along the steep slope of watermelons ripening on the vine. At the bottom of the hill in the valley subject to floods and the felling of trees, Ivo's home was jammed together with 4 dozen cabins on the worst land in central East Texas. Nobody in Little Tunis lived like the Starks, who had too much of everything. Their homes, fronted by a yard of rocks or a cluttered chicken pen, sometimes both, held only the essentials: a table, chairs, a resting place. You could tell by a cabin's kitchen who lived there. Down the road, Ivo knew she would find a banjo and tools for dyeing, since the new couple made pretty music in indigo fabric. Across the way, where Mr. James and his wife lived, a saw and a heaping laundry basket. The story of Ivo's family was found in the beads Mama held while praying, Papa's sledge and file, and the black dust his shoes carried in at the end of the day. Ivo ran through the yard, stopped to pluck a fig, bounded up the porch steps, and threw open the door, quiet enough to hear a mouse pee on cotton. She had beat her brother Timbo home. She yearned to spread the newspaper over the floor and draw her finger along every line of print under the amber sun, molten and gorgeous, pouring through the door like sorghum molasses. But instead, she slammed the door and dashed to her room. Whenever she rushed, Mama liked to say, "Hurry now makes worry later." But sometimes it meant you could hide your treasure without anyone finding out. Her chest heaved the way it did when Papa pushed her high on the church swing. Some parts of the paper remained the same: advertisements from banks, insurance companies, a travel ad, take a sea trip home. Occasionally, a funny drawing made her laugh, but she was more taken with the articles, like stories, only better because they were true. Of the 3 headlines she'd read to Miss Susan, one excited her the most: Spain's possessions in America few, little Cuba the last to go. At school, Miss Stokes had miles of smiles when Ivo rattled off how Spain had lost Florida, California, and, in 1845, Texas, when Congress bought it for $7 million, higher than anybody could count. Ivo felt it was only right to report exactly when Spain lost little Cuba. The sky looked like a field of bluebonnets when she helped Mama with supper that evening. Marking time into the heavy stillness from the corn cribs rode the wind down the hill to huddle around their cabin till dawn. After her brother fell asleep, Ivo drew the curtain down the middle of their room and felt around inside her mattress, stuffed with straw and corn leaves and old newspapers. She lit the lantern to a low flame, holding the paper at arm's length like the well-dressed men did on the oak benches along Main Street. She gave the paper one quick snap open, drawing it close to her face to breathe in ink, rag linen, a promised adventure. She commenced reading, faster than Miss Stokes said that they should, because oil was expensive, burned at night only to prevent injury, like the time she got caught in the bramble, fell over a pile of logs, and hurt her arm on the way to the outhouse. Reading about grown-ups play acting in a Houston theater was worth the accident. Someone was shaking her. For as long as Ivo could remember, Papa chided that she could sleep through a carnival, while Mama said in a tone meant to shame, "Nothing comes to a sleeper but a dream, girl." Ivo sank deeper into her hiding place as the knot in her throat tied and tightened. The theft was bound to catch up to her. You could get away with one ugly deed, but 2 was like herding hens through a waterfall. Burning up oil to read stolen newspapers would lead to the worst whipping, because Mama would never understand why reading was worth lying and stealing for. Under the quilt, she rubbed her hands against the mattress cover to get rid of any traces of smudged ink. Turn this bed loose and put some clothes on. Be quick about it now. Mama, where's Timbo? I ain't never liked to chew my cabbage twice, Ivo. What did I say? It surprised Ivo to find her father asleep on a pallet in the kitchen. She tiptoed around him, half-filled the kettle, and lit the stove. She picked the lint from her braids and bathed. Returning the kettle to its proper place inside the hearth, she saw the misbaha on the mantel. There was trouble. Mama's prayer beads were never left out, and in the eastern corner, her mat remained flat against the floor, as if the morning prayer had been interrupted. Ivo took a pair from the table and recalled a scene from the night before. Her brother Timbo, drenched in sweat, pushing aside his plate after a few bites. Now, in the next room, she heard Mama's voice, soft and tender, different from the one that had yanked her from a dream. Thank you.
That was so beautiful and riveting. I just wanted to keep listening. Thank you so much for being here on this super cold night. I have to say that again. It's pretty awesome. I'm really excited to be here, in part because I started my career as a journalist in Philadelphia. I used to work for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And those years really shaped me. It really helped me understand just how important it is for people to have the right to know. Like, my role as a journalist felt like something really valuable that I was contributing to society. All those feelings came to me as I was living in Philly, right on Lombard Street. So I have this really warm feeling in my heart for this place. It's really interesting that your book, LaShonda, really focuses on these 2 women starting a progressive newspaper. My story has a subplot in which some young Nigerians start a progressive newspaper in Lagos, and the main character's sister joins them. So we have that theme going. It's really fascinating, right? How literature speaks to each other. Right? Anyway, so my book is called Into the Go Slow, and it is about a young woman named Angie who decides, spur of the moment, to travel to Nigeria to follow in her sister's footsteps. Her sister died there 4 years before under kind of mysterious circumstances. Angie and her family were told that her sister Ella was hit by a car, so she died from a car accident. But Angie feels as though there's more to the story, and she can't really rest until she goes there herself to try to get some questions answered. So Into the Go Slow is a title that I definitely fought my editor over because she kept saying to me, no one's going to know what that means. And I kept saying, well, that'll make them pick up the book, hopefully, and open it and try to find out. But really, the term go slow is a kind of patois that Nigerians use. And I learned the other day that a lot of people in the Caribbean use this term too. But in this case, when Nigerians are referring to it, they basically mean that there's a traffic jam. So they'll say to you, you need to leave early because the go slow is crazy-o. So you know that you have to allow for all this extra time. I loved that because I love language. I love the idea of something so literal. Oh yes, when there's a traffic jam, you go slow. But I also loved it because it felt like a metaphor for the kind of story I was trying to tell. My character, Angie, is experiencing a kind of traffic jam of the heart. And so this journey is a way for her to push past that impasse and kind of move forward in her life. So the scene that I'm going to read to you comes from about the middle of the book. And forgive me, I might take some of that water because sorry. So at this point in the story, Angie has gone to Nigeria. She's been there about a week, but it hasn't gone that well for her because everyone she encounters who knew her sister is just not forthcoming. And so she's really gotten discouraged. At this moment, she's had to make a big decision. And just so you are aware, the story is set in 1987. So this is Angie, week 1. She made her way up the road to the taxi park, where the sun now shone on lingering puddles from the morning's heavy rain. She climbed in the back of a waiting car and directed the driver to take her to the airport. What else was there for her to do? Angie felt deflated, as though she had failed a test, blown a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She didn't want to be here anymore, a lone woman chasing after a ghost in a harsh, lonely place. Traffic stalled. As cars inched along the road, she saw that it was not the normal go-slow causing the logjam. It looked like a bundle fallen from a rickety lorry. But as the driver got closer, Angie realized what it was. A body, splayed out, lying in the slow lane of traffic. Cars were swerving around it. It was a woman, a foot still holding its thong sandal, head in a grotesque twist. Angie screamed, "Stop!" The driver turned around. "What is it, please?" She pointed to the woman's body, struggling for words. Right there. Her. Ah, yes, it is an unfortunate part of Nigerian life. He maneuvered around the corpse, behind the other cars. I am afraid you get used to it. Suddenly, Angie pushed the driver in his back. You have to help her. She pushed him again, so hard his chin hit the steering wheel. Do something. He turned to face her. You bitch. What is your fucking problem? You have to do something, she repeated. The driver drove on in angry silence. She turned around, eyeing the dead woman through the rear window. Please do something, she begged, heart racing. He ignored her, drove past the logjam, and once the traffic opened up, he pulled over to the edge of the road and hit the brakes. Get out, he said. Come down, he ordered her. Get out of my fucking taxi. What? Angie felt confused. He pushed her against the back door. I am telling you, come down. I didn't mean to. The driver got out, grabbed Angie's arm. She screamed as he pulled her from the back, throwing her bag behind. Grabbing her duffel, she stumbled onto the narrow shoulder as he got back in the taxi, slammed his door, and screeched away. Cars whizzed by. 4 lanes of traffic stood between her and the exit on the opposite side. Desperate, she waved her hands and hoped that someone would stop. But the cars were flying too fast, as if grateful to be past the inconvenient roadkill, speeding to make up for lost time. Angie stood on the highway's edge. Gravel flew up, hitting her legs and arms. She could be stuck here for hours, forever. Her chest throbbed with panic as she began walking along the shoulder. The sun prickled her skin. Was this what happened to Ella? Was she caught on a road like this, desperate? She thought of her other sister, Denise's admonition. Do not let anything happen to you over there. I cannot bear the thought of delivering more bad news to Mama. Please, God, Angie thought, please, I do not want to die like Ella. Against the sun's glare, she thought she saw tiny figures making their way toward her. She stopped, stood still. The figures grew larger, and as they got closer, she could see that, yes, it was a man, a woman, and a boy. They walked in single file along the edge, closer and closer, approaching. Please, she yelled against the traffic's steady roar. How do you get off this highway? There's no flyover, yelled the man. You must cross. He nodded toward the traffic. We will cross with you. But there must be an exit on this side, she yelled back. Miles away. This is best to just cross here. All three of them were without shoes. The man gently nudged the boy's back. Go, he said. The boy, who could not have been older than 10, looked up at Angie with saucer eyes, then ran onto the highway. Angie gasped as the boy deftly dodged oncoming cars. When he made it across, he waved at them. My God, she said, I cannot do that. The man turned to Angie. His narrow face was all hard angles, but his eyes were sympathetic. You must make your mind blank and just go, he offered. I will show you. He created a rhythmic momentum with his shoulder blades, like a girl entering a double Dutch jump rope game, then darted into the fray. Aghast, Angie watched as he wove between zooming cars before making it to the other side. He waved wildly at her, or perhaps at the other woman, who stood beside her, staring straight ahead. Cars flew by. The boy and the man both waved. The man cupped his hands to his mouth and yelled something that got lost to the wind. Cars passed, and the boy and man disappeared, reappeared. The man gestured for them to come, come. Cars flew by. Come, come. The woman, uttering no words, dashed across the highway. Her wrapper flapped in the breeze as a van barely missed her. She moved adroitly between oncoming traffic and leaped gracefully onto the embankment, like a modern dancer. Once across, the woman too beckoned for Angie to come. The sun was like a laser aimed at Angie's face. The man, woman, and child appeared and reappeared between the whoosh of traffic, and the relentless heat mingled with her terror, making her lightheaded. Angie could no longer be sure. Was it her sister Ella prodding her on? Was Ella telling her to come? Did she want Angie to join her? More cars flew by. Come, come. She looked straight ahead at the disappearing, reappearing woman. White dots floated across her vision. Yes, it was Ella. If she made it across, there her sister would be. The Buddhist chant Ella had taught her came to her, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Angie threw her bags to the side of the road. She moved her shoulders in rhythm with Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Staring ahead, focused on Ella's face, she yelled, I'm coming, I'm coming. She counted 1, 2, 3. Suddenly, a car swerved at her. So close, spewing gravel hit her face with force. She jumped back. More cars passed at breakneck speed. She tried again, moving her shoulders in rhythm, but the chant in her head disappeared. The moment had died. She couldn't do it. She waved to the others. They beckoned from across the highway. All 3 of them. She shook her head no, hoped they could see her gesture, knew they couldn't. She waved goodbye again. exhausted from the effort, her legs untrustworthy. She sat on the highway's edge. Her face hurt. She hugged her knees. Soon enough, the man and woman and boy moved on, shrinking figures making their way up the exit ramp. She thought the boy waved at her one last time. She regretted her own fear, yet the terror sat with her in unmovable force as the sun loomed overhead. Parched, she longed for water. How long could she sit here before someone stopped to help? Even though it was barely midday, the thought of darkness forced her to rise. She grabbed her bags and ran along the road as traffic whipped past, and flying debris attacked her limbs. When she tired, she walked for several minutes, gravel crunching underfoot, duffel heavy. She ran again, and then she walked for an hour more, another hour, resting briefly at intervals. The sun was a penetrating heat lamp. Her throat felt glued shut. She didn't know how much farther she could go. She looked out onto the oncoming traffic, but again terror kept her on the highway's edge, one foot in front of the other. Her hands dripped with sweat, and the handle of her duffel kept sliding from her grip. Walk, rest, walk, rest, walk, rest. Mercifully, she glimpsed a sign for the next exit. She hurried on, feeling blood drip down her legs and a welt forming on her face. Minutes later, she was making her way clumsily up the exit ramp, its incline a small mountain under the weight of her bags. She trudged to the first building she saw, a post office. She walked inside, the interior's dark coolness a relief. She headed straight for a nearby bench and collapsed. She closed her eyes and waited for her heartbeats to slow. In time, she opened her eyes and searched until she spotted it. She stood and dragged her bag across the floor. "I want to call the United States," she said to a young woman perched behind a desk. The woman had drawn in dramatic eyebrows. She handed Angie a scrap of paper and instructed her to write down the number she wanted to call. She pointed to a row of phone booths without doors and told Angie to enter number 4. Inside was a large gray telephone with no dials. Angie sat on the little wooden seat jutting out from the wall and watched as the woman attempted to make the connection from her main switchboard. Moments passed. The little booth was hot, stuffy. Finally, the woman arched her exaggerated eyebrows, nodded her head, and said, "You can pick up now." She picked up the receiver. "Hello, Mama?" She could hear her words echoing back. There was a delay in the transmission, a beat, before she heard her mother say, in a formal voice, "You have reached the Mackenzie residence. No one is in to take your call right now. Please leave a message after the beep." When had her mother gotten an answering machine? Beep! The sound felt like an affront, jarring and discordant. Feeling the pressure, Angie opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She hung up. Thank you.
Good night, guys. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for including me on this great panel with LaShonda and Bridgett. Sorry, I usually take off more so I don't go over time. So the novel I wrote, A Brief History of Seven Killings, a very loose definition or a very loose description of it is, it's a novel about a series of characters, actually over 100, who in one way or another end up being caught up in the assassination attempt on Bob Marley in 1976. So I'm going to read two of them, and I thought it would be interesting to read. The first one is I'm going to read about Americans in Jamaica and Jamaicans in America. So the first person I'm going to read his name is Alex Pierce, and he's a journalist with Rolling Stone. And this is 1979, and the only thing you need to know is that he's in his hotel room, and on his bed is an assassin with a gun. And he's woken up and there's this man with a gun sitting on his bed. And this is Kingston. There's a man in blue sitting on the edge of my bed. Sid Vicious died 2 days ago. Nobody knows shit, but word was that his mother just fed the fucker heroin right after coming out of detox. Rock is sick and dead and living in New York City. Found him sprawled out naked in bed with a probably also naked actress. 21. Fuck punk anyway. The only thing we can agree on is 2 sevens clash. My mom would be proud. Lord knows it wasn't the greatest idea, being an audiophile when the bank du jour was Hawkwind. But Sid Vicious died 2 days ago, and months after killing his girlfriend. Dead men, all these dead men. Only 4 people know that the singer nearly got shot in the heart. The singer, his manager, his surgeon, and me. Because I caught him on a lucky day when he didn't try to kick my ass for following him all over London. Only 3 people know that he was eating a quarter of a grapefruit, having cut off half to give to the manager. Only 2 people know that the singer said, "I just Lassie Rastafari." And only I know because I caught him on a lucky day in London. There's a fucking man in a fucking blue shirt sitting on the fucking edge of my fucking bed. And I'm starting to feel like I'm the murdered character in the game Life, about to tell the murderer to grab his weapon and get on with it already. Just fucking get on with it. My left leg has gone to sleep. I'm seeing some black men and more black men, and they're merging into one black man and no black man at all. There's a bald-headed man in blue sitting on the side of my bed, rubbing his head, rubbing his shiny, sweaty, light brown head. His shirt is navy blue. My leg has gone to sleep behind his sinking ass. Stare at the ceiling, Alex Pierce. Count grooves in the stucco. Look for Jesus. There's Jesus. Look for a cross. Look for Italy. Look for a shoe. Look for a woman's face. The man on my bed, holy shit, has a gun. He has a gun, motherfucker. He has a fucking gun. And he's waving it at his temple. At me. At his temple. He's about to pull a Hemingway. Why would he sneak into my room to off himself? I'm not going to be your audience, fucking Christ. Don't pop that shit and splat your brain all over my clean sheets, dirty sheet, fucking scumfuck, encrusted, pubic hair littered sheets. But they're mine. And I don't want your blood and brains all over them. Oh, he's not going to shoot himself. He's going to shoot me. He's going to shoot me. Fucking heart stop pumping. He's going to hear. Nobody can hear a heart pump, you idiot. Yes, he can. He's going to hear. Oh, fuck, oh, fuck. He's spitting it. He's dangling it. He's a cowboy. This is his 6-shooter. High Noon, Liberty Valance, Sons of Katie fucking Elder. At least I'm going to die like a true Jamaican. That is not funny. It's not funny. Fucking fuck this. I'm going to die today. I'm not going to die today. Spinning the gun like some gunslinger, like he just picked up a worn-out copy of Gunfighter Ballads that's in every Jamaican's house. I'm not going to die. Today my mother is not going to be left standing out at the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport, sorting out a coffin box, or worse, putting up posters all over Kingston saying, "Missing, have you seen this man?" Coming on Dick Cavett to talk about her poor son and the horrible bureaucracy in Jamaica who won't assist her. And it's a conspiracy, really it is, or at least a cover-up. Maybe it's just really bad incompetence that took her son, and she knows something was up. Somebody did something, and she'll move heaven and earth to find out the truth, even if the police, the minister, even the ambassador won't lift a finger to help. I'll become a story, and she'll become one of those haggard old women whose other children will desert her. She was the world's greatest mom before she became obsessed with a ghost, and will have nothing but cigarettes and the mission left, the mission to uncover the truth. She'll also do 60 Minutes and more caveat, and when everybody starts to forget, I don't know what she'll do. Christ, please make him go away. Please let it be that I'll close my eyes, I'll close them for as long as you want, and when I open them, he'll be gone. Do you want me to pray? Because I will. I swear to God, I will. Fuck this. I will not think of heaven. Who the fuck does that? I will not do it. I'll just say to him that if you kill me now, right here, I'll look you in the eye and stain myself in your head for as long as you live. I swear I'll haunt you like a motherfucker so hard that an exorcist will look at you and say, God damn, son, there's no help for you. I'll come with that crucifix like Linda Blair and that sister mass-murdering motherfucker from Amityville, and I'll cut one chunk of your brain so that all three of us can live in there, and we'll eat you from the inside out like cancer. I'll haunt you, motherfucker. I'll make you scream devil upon you in church, and I'll make you see you blind, and I'll make you talk to yourself everywhere because only you and I know that you're talking to me. And I'll drive you off the causeway into the sea, and you still won't die, because I won't make you die. I'll make you live 100 years to haunt you forever, and I'll write my name in the mirror every time you take a shower. And one day you will read, "Get ready to suck cocks in hell," on the ceiling, and I'll make your bed shake and elbows itch, and you'll scratch so hard everybody will come looking for the heroin, and no dog will go anywhere near you because they can sense when a spirit is living rent-free in your head. So you better turn away. You better get up, walk out of this room right now, or I swear to God, I will. The phone rings. He jumps. I jump. Gun in mid-spin, gun drops. He looks for me, and I look at him. Bends on for the gun, kicking, kicks him in the back, and again in the back of the head. Roll now, climb out of bed. He grabs my foot. Get the fuck off me, get the fuck. He's climbing. Punch, he catches my head, won't give it back. Pulling off the bed, he screams. I scream. His hand is around my neck. I'm red and getting redder. A fat goose, where are your eyes? Coughing hand grips my neck, crushing my Adam's apple. He slaps me away like I'm a bitch, a fucking bitch, coughing as he's sitting on my chest and I can't breathe. Jesus Christ, he grabs my right hand like I'm a silly little bitch. I'm a fucking silly little bitch. Can't move my head, he's pinning it. Relax. The feet first. Let them find me at least in peace. When the phone is ringing, I jump, and he jumps, not on my neck, too slow. He turns back his hand, and on my hand I slap his face. I slap like I'm the girl. I look at the lamp, the heavy lamp, the crochet, the Gideon Bible. No gun. Can't see the gun anywhere. Can't see the gun. Remember when I grabbed it, the sharp, dark end. Why won't he say anything? He's about to squeeze my neck, and I grab the letter opener. He grabs my neck. I squeeze the letter opener. I'm in a mid-swing straight for his neck. My knuckle slams right against his chin. It feels like punching. No, it goes in, and it goes in deep. He looks at me through high eyebrows, wide. He's not touching it. The letter opener in his neck. Blood trickles and spurts, more like tap bursting. His eyes. He's not speaking. He's jerking. He's rolling off the bed. He's on the bed. He's off the bed. He's walking through the door. His right knee buckles. He stands up straight. His right knee buckles. He falls to the ground. So I'm going to move on. I swear the rest of it is not that violent. So I'm going to read Jamaican in New York. What do you need to know about this scene? Let me go back. Sorry. So in this scene, Dorcas Palmer is in the Bronx, and Dorcas Palmer has just been found out. Turns out she is an undocumented immigrant living in the States. And the person who's in her house, an old white man named Mr. Coulter, has just found out that she's living illegally. And also that her name is not Dorcas Palmer. And the reason why he found out is that he went into her bathroom and found this book, How to Disappear Completely and Never Be Found, which was one of the really big underground texts of the 70s. So he's literally waving it in front of her. Seriously, have you taken a good look at this shit? At the cover? A pair of thick-rimmed glasses and a big pink nose. Who's it by, Groucho Marx? And my God, look at the other publications from this place. Improvised Weapons of the American Underground. And this, Professional Homemade Cherry Bomb. And what's destined to be a classic, How to Lose Your Ex-Wife Forever. What is this really? I'd think you were militia, but you're not in Texas. And far as I know, militias haven't relaxed their no niggers policy. Meanwhile, I am trying to figure out why exactly this man has started to think he has the wherewithal to act out in my house. He's been acting familiar all day, but this shit, like he's my father or husband or something, is a whole new level. No, he's a bored old man who finally gets a mystery to solve. Whatever it is, this man have some nerve. Calm down. What do you mean calm down? You some kind of fugitive? Why would you need such a book? Not that I owe you an explanation, but I saw it in a bookstore and was curious. What bookstore? Soldier of Fortune? These wackos read? It's just a book. It's a manual, Dorcas, if that's your real name. Nobody buys a manual unless they plan to use it. And judging by the dog ears, you've used it lots. I don't have to answer anything to you. Then don't. But come on, surely this book is a crock of crap. Yeah, total junk, as you would say. That's why I didn't use it. I said the book was crap. I didn't say you weren't using it. Why am I not kicking him out of my house for getting angry with me? It's my house. I pay the rent. And nobody gets to speak louder than me. What? I said it's my house and nobody gets to speak louder than me in my damn house. Sorry. Don't apologize. I'm the one that's sorry. He sits down. Another version of me would say that I really appreciate that he cares and be even moved that somebody would care about me despite knowing so little, but I don't say any of that. I didn't use the book. Well, thank God. Because most of the stuff in there that it says to do, I already did. It's not the only book out there. What are you saying? Mr. Calters pulls up one of my dining chairs and sits right in front of me. He takes off his jacket, and I try to stop reading symbols in everything, at least for one night. This is something I've picked up from American women. This trying to read every single thing a man does as containing a secret message. Right now, he's the fugitive. He's looking at me with that tilted head, like he asked me a question and was waiting an answer. I wish his man would understand that I'm not like all these people he watch on Donahue. All these people with their private business that they're dying to tell 13 million people. Tell one of these people a simple hi, and they bend down low to tell you what they know. Everybody wants to confess, but they're not telling you nothing. Flushing Cemetery, 46th Avenue, Flushing, New York. Flushing Cemetery is where you'll find her if you care to look. Who? Dorcas Palmer. Dorcas Nevrine Palmer. Born November 2, 1958, Spaldings, Clarendon, Jamaica. Died June 15, 1979, Astoria, Queens. Cause of death, tragic circumstances, the obituary said, meaning she got hit by a car. Can you imagine somebody get hit by a car in New York City? And you're using her name just like that? Well, Claudette Colbert was starting to sound obvious. Not funny. I wasn't joking. Claudette Colbert was starting to sound obvious. You can't just use a dead person's name. Isn't that pretty easy to trace? This might come as a shock, but the department in charge of death certificates is really not the largest in the municipal government. I'm more shocked by your consistent use of irony, not what I remember about Jamaicans. Anyway, I insist on you telling me everything. Right, you really want to hear this. You sound like you really want to tell this. No, not really. I'm not into this confessional fad thing going around lately. You Americans and you want to talk about it? I mean, Jesus. Anyway, this is New York. Because this is New York, not many people who died here, born here. And states don't have some grand record for everybody. In fact, the Department for Birth Records and for Death Records don't have anything to do with each other. They're not even in the same place. So even if there's a death certificate, there is no birth certificate. And if you can get a hold of the birth certificate, then you have proof that you're you, without the real you coming after you. What about her family? All in Jamaica. They couldn't afford to fly out for the funeral. Social Security? Oh, she's collecting that now. She wasn't. All you have to do is get a birth certificate. Yes, I just called the registrar in Jamaica and asked for a copy of, well, her birth certificate. People are always ready to believe the worst more than the not so bad, so why not give them the worst? You'd be surprised how many places you can say, I'm sorry, but I misplaced my passport, or just say it was stolen, but I do have my birth certificate. Guess you'd have a slight issue if your name was still Claudette Colbert. Or Kim Clark. Who? When were you her? Long time now, she gone. The next thing I did was contact the Census Bureau, requesting whatever information they had on Dorcas Palmer. Oh, right, they handed it over just like that. No, they handed it over for $7.50. Jesus Christ, how old are you? Why you need to know that? Oh, right, you're the one keeping a secret. Social Security didn't think it a little weird when you applied for a number so late? Not if you're an immigrant. Not if you have your birth certificate but can't find your passport. Not if you have a story long enough and boring enough that they will do anything just to get you out of the line. Carry these two with you and you can easily get a state ID. After that, $30 gets you a passport. But I didn't get one of those. That's in Chapter 2. But you're not an American citizen. No, not even a resident. Well, I have a Jamaican passport. With your real name? No. Christ, what did you do? Me? I didn't do anything. Says you. Come on, you must be on the lam. This story is already the most exciting thing I've heard since I don't even remember. What did you do? Who are you running from? Who knew that when you open your door that your day would end like this, see? And I'm not on the lam. I'm not the criminal. You got some son of a bitch for a husband who used to hit you. Yeah. Really? No. Dorcas, or whatever your name is, it's Dorcas now. I hope you thanked her for her generosity in sharing her name. He stands up and goes over to the window. Since you migrated here under a false name, I'm right to assume that the person you're running from is in Jamaica? But they clearly have resources to track you here, hence the false names. You should be a detective. Why do you think you're so damn safe? You're blocking the moon. And I've been living here since 1979, and he hasn't found me yet. So it's a he you're running from. Did you have to leave kids behind? What? No kids. Good God. They aren't so bad until they start to talk. Sorry. Who's this guy you're running from? Why you want to know? Maybe I can, what, help? I already helped myself. He's far away from New York City and has no reason to come here. You're still hiding, though. Lots of Jamaicans live in New York City. Somebody might know him. That's why I don't live near Jamaicans. But why New York at all? Well, I wasn't going to spend my life in Maryland, and Arkansas wasn't going to work out. When I'm not working, I just go to the library or MoMA. Doesn't sound like much of a life if you're still watching your own back. Don't you get tired? Tired of what? Tired of what, indeed? Right now, life is having a place and establishing credit. Pretty much everything in here is on a payment plan, even though I could very well have paid for it all up front. That's from Chapter 4. Look, if this is a moment where we have the big catharsis, I'm very sorry to disappoint you. Oh, disappointment is the last word I would think of when I think of you, darling. I really should have said, I'm not your darling. I really should have said that. Instead, I said, it's getting late. You should go home. And how do you propose that a distinguished white gentleman of certain age gets himself out of the, where are we again? The Bronx. Strange. I totally forgot. And how did we... Never mind. Nature calls. He closes the door. His jacket has slipped off the chair and I pick it up. Heavy. Too heavy for a summer jacket, I'm thinking. It's even lined. I would sweat off these hips in this jacket. I'm folding it over when I see writing way up in the left shoulder, which does not look like cleaning instructions. It's in handwriting, like somebody wrote it with a Sharpie. If you are reading this and are near the owner of this jacket, please call 212-468-7767. Urgent. Please call immediately. Thank you. So do we come up?
Thank you very much for those three very animated and dramatic readings. I've noticed over the years that we've had thousands of authors here, and not everyone knows how to read their own book, so kudos to you. The way this works, folks, raise your hand, I'll call on you, and we will get you a microphone. Who would like to start us off? Gentleman about 8 rows back.
For Mr. James, I'm 610 pages in. It's not brief, and I won't give it away to everyone else here, but 7's a little low with the body count. So, explain the title.
Well, and it's funny because even the guys who tried to kill Bob Marley was actually 8. 8 is just not as sexy as 7. Plus, his killing didn't really fit in the rest of the book. But it was really based on the 7 men, the original 7 men who were killed. And it was, it's funny because in a lot of ways it was a very, not formulaic, but I really followed it, was very disciplined with it. And I really was trying to get all 6 people killed. I know that sounds weird, right? I would say things like that. And the reason why it took that long is it just took that long to kill them off. It's like, I'm at page 600. Why don't you die already? It's like, so it was really that. The brief history part, though, was because the stories of these men are actually pretty brief. They're almost, postscripts on the real story. They're not talked about. It's not spoken about. Most of what I found out, I had to do some serious digging. The rest was a lot of guesswork. So it also refers to that these men kind of died without anybody paying attention or caring.
Yeah, gentleman on our left.
This question,
Sir, please wait for the mic.
This question is also for Mr. James.
Yes.
I want to thank you for the cast of characters list in the front. I had to constantly go back to that. And I also wanted to thank you for giving a perspective of that not all of the local Jamaicans really loved Bob Marley. That there was sort of a jealousy, for lack of a better term, and I just thought that was great. The book was phenomenal. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that thank you. Especially when you get into just the Jamaica in general in that time, and Marley actually has quite a few songs that speak about this. Talking about them I got tired for seeing face and me don't know how me and them are gonna work it out. So a lot of it actually speaks to the ambivalence. A lot of the really sort of rich upper crust Jamaicans didn't like him at all. But also a lot of the really newly empowered sort of black power movement in Jamaica. My dad, for example, despised them because my dad was a generation. Like we went and got our own education. I read all of Elridge Cleaver. So on, and here comes this half-white, not educated, not so on, and suddenly he's the voice of black struggle. And they hated it. So there was, at the same time, also because Bob was one of the guys who came literally from the ground up, as opposed to from the top down. There was always this sort of, resentment. The only person I can compare him to is maybe Fela Kuti. Yeah. I cannot think of another musician who has ever had so many forces against him at the same time and still creating. And still being, for the most part, really positive about it. Yeah.
I wonder if each of you could talk about what brought you to your current book, starting with Bridgett.
You know, Fella's a major character in my book. I think in some ways what brought me to the book was a chance to write about him in a fictional context, because I had this great opportunity to actually see him perform live in Nigeria. And, you know, if you ever see that, you just don't forget it. If you're a writer, you want to figure out a way to put it into a book. So, honestly, I think what really brought me to this story was my own personal story. I, like my main character, did go to Nigeria when I was in my 20s. I spent about a year there. And I also traveled there shortly after my own sister died. She died very suddenly from an pulmonary embolism. So it was very shocking and devastating for me because I idolized her. And that took a long time for me to process and turn into fiction. But when I decided I was ready to handle it, the big burning question for me really was, who are you when the person you've defined yourself against is gone? And that really propelled me to really try to explore that question in the fiction. And so the result is really this book.
Thank you. LaShonda?
Well, I talked a little bit about, before my reading, about the reverence that my family had for the black press. Much later, after 1979, and that first errand to the corner store for my grandmother, I was in graduate school pursuing a PhD in American Studies at the College of William and Mary, and I noticed that every fantastic African American history book, if I paid attention to where source material had come from, and I am an avid reader of footnotes, I noticed that all the source material came from black newspapers. And that just rang an enormous bell for me because of the way that my family had embraced the black press. So I started to think about what the black press meant for black America, a nation within a nation during the progressive era, during the Jim Crow period. And I thought that I would, once I finished my dissertation, embark upon a novel that would really be a sort of Valentine to the black press. And it was also at the same time very important for me to highlight an African-American woman character who was not down and out, who was not unloved, who was not abused. I wanted to write about a functional black family. I wanted to write about a black woman character who had the opportunity to pursue a career like journalism. And I wanted to write a queer character into history, because I believe that one of the ways that American culture has sort of gotten away with this maligning of homosexuals in our culture is by erasing us from history. And it begins in lots of ways. Our efforts to turn this around, to rectify this erasure, can begin in myriad ways. On a personal level, I find that I can make a difference, I hope, I believe, by writing queer characters into historical fiction as a reminder that we've always been there and we've contributed to American society, not just through Hollywood, not just through Broadway theater, but as activists, as journalists, as attorneys, as doctors. Thank you.
Wow. I just glanced at the book for a second, because I remember the very first page I wrote for this book, the very first scene, is now on page 458. So this, which is a matter of saying I had no idea what I was doing. I knew I read years ago. It was in 1991, so before I even started writing. 1991, I read an article that Timothy White published in Spin. It was a summer issue of Spin magazine where he did a sort of postscript to his Catch a Fire biography. And it was the first time he went into the actual day, the actual night, when these men tried to kill Marley. And I was really fascinated by those men. Again, because as a writer, I think certainly for me, I'm really interested in marginal characters, people who retreat from the picture frame. That's who I want to follow. It's thank God I wasn't on the grassy knoll. I'd be there now. So I've always been interested in that. But this started out as a series of just novellas from people who weren't connected to Marley at all. And it sort of just almost by accident merged together. It wasn't even my idea to merge them. It was a friend of mine. But it was a story about the men. And I think I had no idea when I started it. For one, it was supposed to be a novella, so it wasn't even supposed to be a big novel. It was supposed to be a short one. I think, though, and I'm sure it's probably experience. Certainly, I'm just going to guess the experience of both of these guys here as well. So once you start to find a story, there are other stories underneath it, and there are more, and you just start to. Novel writing becomes a kind of literary detective work. And that's what kept happening. So a story that was supposed to just be about a guy who's killing one of the killers ends up being about the Cold War, ends up being about politics, ends up being about everything from Rastafarianism to Pan-Africanism, because it just it kind of really just happened. It kind of exploded on itself. So it was kind of just a mess that happened to work.
Some questions from the audience. Yeah, in the third row here, Kitsy, with your hand up.
Could you talk a little about the research involved in your writing of fiction? It sounds like all of you did a tremendous amount, but I'm curious.
Who'd like to start?
Oh. Should I start? Sure. Yeah, I did quite a bit of research, but it was really organic at first. Luckily, I had saved all of these journals that I'd kept while I was actually in Nigeria, and so that was really helpful. I had letters that people had written to me, and all that became like really a kind of source material. So that was really the impetus for me to then move forward and do more sort of contemporary research. It was fascinating. I felt as though I was researching an experience I had actually had to learn what really was going on and to give myself some context. For instance, this really happened to me. I was doing research and I was like, oh my God, I did have malaria. I like read what the symptoms are for malaria, and I was like, oh my God, that's what I had. So it was odd and beautiful because I was really kind of interrogating my own life. And I had this distance now and maturity, and I could understand what the 20-something-year-old self couldn't. I was living it then, but it took all these years for me to look back and try to understand it. So for me, the research was really, really exciting in that way. It was all about discovery, and it just... as Marlon said, it just kept blossoming because I kept finding new things to be interested in that helped me understand the context of what was happening for me then. Yeah, so.
My research took me into archives to look at black newspapers, and I looked at black newspapers that came from all over the country, mainly because I wanted to glean a sense of tone from the newspapers, and I discovered pretty early on in my research that basically African-American newspapers took one of two roads during this period, during the Jim Crow period. My character launches her newspaper in 1918, and the newspapers were either accommodationist or they were militant, and so it took several months just to get very comfortable with the tone of the papers, but I would go to research anything that I needed. For example, food plays a role in the book, and so I researched recipes. My characters travel to France, and they're eating because you eat when you're in Paris. You eat all the time if you're lucky, and so I had to, for example, do a little culinary research, look at historical cookbooks to figure out what characters would have been eating in Paris in 1925. I researched fashion. I researched the materials from women's colleges because my character matriculates at a fictional all-black, all-girls college in Austin, Texas, based on the real college, Tillotson College. She matriculates from 1905 to 1907, so I had to figure out what kind of a course load she would have taken, how she would have dressed, and things of that nature. And then throughout writing the novel, research questions would pop up. So for example, when Ivo is in college in 1905, I want her to be sort of cutting her political teeth, so to speak. This is where she's discovering journalism. She's falling in love with being editor-in-chief of the college's newspaper. And I thought now would be a really good time to sort of introduce her to the quote-unquote real world. So I went to the archives looking for what was really happening between 1905 and 1907 that would have gotten my character excited. And I was really amazed to find out that during this period, in 1906, when Ivo takes over the newspaper, there are over 30 boycotts of trolleys happening in the southern United States, which blew me away, because the first time I recall hearing about boycotts was with Rosa Parks, and to discover that the tradition of boycotts began 50 years before Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat in the bus just blew my hair back. And that happened all the time in the research of the book, and I was really grateful for those moments because they enthused me. They got me very excited about returning to my narrative.
I do a lot of research, mostly as a procrastination tool. I don't think people understand when I say I absolutely love to not write, and it's a great way. To not write. But I do a lot of research. So even with this book, which took place starts in the 70s and ends in 91. Everything from just researching remembering how people spoke, making sure you get which decade spaz is used right, not the 70s. But also, because the novel spins in so many directions, stuff about the Cold War, the history of the CIA's involvement in the Americas and in Africa, stuff about Bob Marley, which I didn't know about. Something about Jamaica I didn't know about. I was 6 years old in 1976, so it didn't matter how bad things was. It was a world of wonder for me, and so just even things. I think one of the things I find I learned from David Carr, who passed away last week, sadly. He had a way of not trusting facts, even if he knew them personally. So I'd go and research things from what people wore and when people said things like Nito, which was never cool. To who are the names that keep cropping up when we talk about the Cold War? The funny thing about the Cold War is that no matter where the country is, the players tended to be the same people. So, a lot of that. And, but, in Jamaica, nobody in Jamaica trusts facts. We trust rumors. It's great that this isn't a history book, but I'm going to go down to the street and ask somebody, okay, how did it really go? And for, a lot of what happens in the middle of the book, especially when Marley returns to Jamaica, most of that I heard from discussions on a stoop. Because a lot of that you really won't find in any books, maybe in the more recent ones. Why this second peace concert and what the outcome was expected to be and so on. That's stuff that people told me because I just asked them. Georgie, who's in No Woman No Cry, is actually still sitting on that stoop in Jamaica. People point out that's Georgie from No Woman No Cry. So you just go over and ask him. So which is what I did. So yeah, and I'll even right up to the minute when it was about to be published, I was still checking stuff.
It never ends until the deadline. Well, sadly, speaking of deadlines, we are out of time. Please join me in thanking Bridgett Davis, LaShonda Katrice Barnett, and Marlon James.